tech. Oh, sorry. Okay, so a short introduction. If anybody was at the Tech Bauer show, so I do a lot of open data, and it's not a promotion, but a background. So what I do in my spare time. So that's the idea is open football data, the Wikipedia or the Wikidata for football data. And of course, there's a football JSON. So if people want football data, usually I get a request, I want the data in JSON. And another project, so I have like 50 organizations on GitHub, but now I just do the, not to get crazy, to do only the football. I'm a volunteer at the CIA, the World Factbook, and the World Factbook has fantastic information how many women, single women in Austria, or how many tanks and how many military helicopters and where do you find oil, and the Factbook country profile, and there's also a Factbook JSON, so it's like a document store, so every country profile is basically a JSON file. But let's get JSON. We have seen the After Effects exported as JSON. So JSON is everywhere and is a super popular data format. But anybody knows who invented JSON and in what year? Or because the great story about JSON is it didn't happen by a big company. It was not IBM, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, but this was a nobody. So a nobody. And the nobody claims he didn't invent JSON, he just discovered it. Because the story of JSON is it's just JavaScript, and Douglas Crockford, he was famous or is still famous for JavaScript, the good parts. And of course there's JavaScript, the bad parts, and then JavaScript, the ugly parts. And so the JSON, of course, was promoted by Douglas Crockford, and so it was an individual nobody. And the important part, it's a human. So I think I don't have to how it looks like JavaScript object notation, universal data. But the important part, it's for machines, but also for humans, because if you design a format for machines, they don't care about readability. And the machine prefers binary data. 0 and 1 is all a machine cares, and it has so. But to break, or anybody knows, or what's your favorite? Is JSON your favorite data interchange format? For example, my favorite format, it's not on the list, or it would be. I tell at one more thing at the end. What's my favorite data format in plain text for humans? But XML. So sorry for the history, 20 years back, there was no JSON. So it was in the early 21st century when JSON was discovered. And JavaScript, of course, had a super bad reputation for script kiddies. And so XML was, the hotness. And so, of course, when JSON version 1 or JSON was promoted and discovered, it was XML was a competition, and of course it was not welcome. It's like JSON, fuck off, nobody needs you. And so it was like XML does everything, and even it does it better. It had node and attributes, and it has namespaces, and it has schema validation. So what is the point of JSON? And so Douglas Crockford, he was, or it's still on the JSON.org website. He has the fat-free alternative, so it was really targeted. That it's a better alternative to XML, and it's easy to read and write for humans and machine and so on and so forth. And 25 years of XML. Anybody know what happened to XML? You can improve XML. Did anybody improve XML? So there's XML version 1.1. I think it came out 5 years ago, but there was not really a lot of changes. But one change, or they try to do now, is actually to make XML simpler. And there's micro XML, for example, that makes it simpler. And the official micro XML, it has an official JSON representation. So if you have an XML document, you can map it to JSON with the like official, and that's how it looks. But of course, nobody cares about micro XML, or who cares about improving XML, make it easier. So they throw out the TTDs, for example, the document type definitions, and make it simpler, but it's going nowhere. And of course, IBM has JSON-X enterprise JSON in XML for the enterprise, you know. It's no joke. So it's big business. And if you have an address, that's how the nice, without namespace, but that's how the namespace version looks like, you know. And I think one joke is, you know, they want ordered elements, otherwise it crashes and so on and so forth. But that's it's a real product. And so, but the evolution, I'm a big fan of evolution. And so usually I make the joke, you know, I have an initiative, it's called JSON version 1.1. And then I get the command, I didn't know, you know, that JSON version 1.1 exists. And the story is, you know, the inventor, Douglas Crockford, he discovered JSON. And then he said, you know, it is perfect, you know. He will never ever change it. It has no version. And it's, you know, until the end of history, you know. And so this is, there are philosophy in other formats too. Some people, I think it's crazy. So my joke is, you know, I want evolution, so I don't have JSON version 2.0, which is, you know, in big companies. I work at a big company, and they have currently, you know, like big company 4.0, you know. And last year we had 3.0. So, but I'm an evolution, small steps, so JSON 1.1. So what is next for JSON? So he doesn't want, so nobody is, you know, officially it's forever done. But anybody has complaints, what is missing in JSON as it is now? And so if you look on the internet, there is, you know, the important part is if anybody wants to fix JSON, you know, you have to fix him. Remove these, you know, we don't want these. It's perfect, you know, go away. Don't make, it's like fix the engineers who try to fix JSON. Nothing is broken. But it's super, what's missing? So in the case of the After Effects export, you know, if you don't edit, if a machine reads JSON, you know, you don't complain, you don't care. But once you start to use it for humans and as configuration file you want to edit, the first thing if it's a human format, you need comments, you know. It's ridiculous, you know, if you have a format for humans and you don't have comments, you know, that's, it's super basic. Every format, so you need comments. And the other one is, for example, unquoted keys, you know. If you use keys, then you have to, you have to double quote, for example. There are no multi-line strings. This is important if you have, I have an example later for a podcast or for web feeds. And if you have your blog story, of course, the kids today, you know, if they are blogging, they are, hi, I'm here. You know, that's the article. You don't need, you don't even have a full sentence, you know. But 20 years ago, you know, if you were a blog post, it might have, you know, 2,000 words, 5 paragraphs, you know. Then one string might be, so multi-line string would be for old school, would be great, you know. And there even for multi-line strings, you know, the other format that was mentioned in the beginning is YAML. So YAML was initially, and it's still super popular, was like the fat-free or the better alternative for XML. And it was also, the YAML was also started by individual and has no backing from big companies. So it was also started, you know, as an anti-enterprise, and it has the folded and unfolded multi-line strings. Or another big one is if you generate JSON, you have the last comma, you know, always breaks because the last comma, there's no last comma in lists. But if you want to generate and add new items, then usually, you know, pragmatic languages, they always have, you can add a trailing comma. So if you have a list and you have a trailing comma, you know, it is allowed usually, because if you generate, and there are hundreds of more, there are no the data types. Now typing is super, TypeScript and Reason and all these languages for improving JavaScript with types. But the types in JSON are pretty basic, so there's no date, for example, no timestamp. And of course, there are people who, the type crazy guys, you know, they want even more types. They want maps and symbol sets and so on and so forth. But of course, I have an initiative, JSON 1.1, but I was not the first one. And so on the internet, there are many JSON improvements. Anybody has a favorite one? So the most obvious is called JSON 6, because JSON was discovered from JavaScript, you know, 20 years ago. But 20 years ago, JavaScript was pretty simple. And now there's JavaScript 6 and JavaScript 7. And in JavaScript, in the new JavaScript, you have actually multi-line strings with backticks. And in JavaScript, you have comments and so forth. So what you can do is, you know, you have JSON 6, which actually does nothing new, but just adopt the multi-line strings and from JavaScript. So it's still, so there's JSON 5, even JSON 5, there's JSON 6, and then there's human user interface, human JSON, simple object JSON, micro JSON, and the JSON 1.1, JSON X for JSON with extension, which is my little, but let's look, for example, JSON for humans. So it has comments, it uses JavaScript comments and the C-style comments. It supports backticks as quotes from multi-lines, and so on and so forth. And the important part always is every JSON string is also a valid, so it's upwards, backwards compatible. And I think the fun part is if you add this one to JSON, do I have it here? I mean, this looks like a monster, but basically that's all the code you need, you know. That's a regular expression. I'm a big fan of text patterns and regular expression, but this code actually does everything, you know, and you have all the power of human JSON. So it's really, it's not a question of, you know, how hard can it be, but it's more to get people to move, you know. Greta is going to New York. But, you know, will people change, you know? I think most people don't care, you know. If the planet burns, you know, who cares? I'm dead. This is. And so it's like, who cares, you know? Who cares about improving a JSON, you know? It works for me. And if I want to change it, you know, I only have trouble, you know? Anyway, but so it's as easy. You just pick this tiny to JSON. And what it actually does, that's a good strategy for the evolution. It converts it to plain JSON, so it's not, you know, it's not converting directly into a JavaScript object, but it gives you it converts it to standard JSON. Of course, the joke about standard JSON is when Crockford was selling, trying to promote JSON, you know, and he was going to the enterprise. The enterprise would ask, you know, little Crockford, is this a standard? And then he had to say, no, it's not a standard. And then, please go away, you know. We don't want your stuff because it's not a standard. So that's, if you do new formats, it's like the first question you get is it a standard? And so the fun part now is JSON has 5 standards now, you know. It has a ISO standard, it has the ECMA standards, it has a Internet Engineering Task Force working standard. And the great part is he does not compromise. So the standard is really like a 2-page document, you know, because usually, you know, if you have standards, they are like, you cannot even print it, you know, 500 pages, 2,000 pages, you know. And so simple object notation, what does it have? It has a comma. You can actually, JSON doesn't need commas, really, the computer. You can make comma optional. And there's still a valid syntax parsing. And so, but the other part is you can also add extra commas, you know, if you want to convert it. And so what I did, so JSON with extensions, so this is JSON X, the big X, so it's not the enterprise version from IBM, but this JSON version 1.1. What I've done, I've just combined the simple JSON with the human JSON in one package, the best of both. Anyways, and so this is how it looks like. I think one important is the multi-line, and the other one would be, without quotes, the keys. And so really, if you have to type it, you don't really care if the machine generates it and the machine reads it. But a great example is the package JSON for node modules. And the package JSON, if it gets generated, you don't care. But usually that's an example of a configuration file. And so what do? The Webpack, for example, what do? They started with JSON, and nobody's using JSON because they have no comments, and it's so, they unquoted. So they use JavaScript as configuration, which is not bad, But they should, instead of using JavaScript as configuration, why not fix JSON, And so if you are pragmatic or not idealistic, it's too late, I have another project, it's called CSV. It's actually even more popular than JSON, the most popular open data format. And so I have a couple of initiatives to improve CSV. And then I usually get the comments, it's like, oh, it looks like you are 45 years too late. So in this case, only 20 years too late, Is it too late? Can you change it? Because the official position from Douglas Crockford is he doesn't want people to claim JSON, the name. And he's open if you improve it or something, you have to use a new name, But I'm kind of using, the idea just add a version number. There's no trouble. And so is it too late? And my philosophy is, of course, the philosophy of evolution. You have two choices, evolve or die, So if you don't change, you will die. Not today, but anyway. So I think there's always, I'm a big fan of software is never done, And so it's never, and it's never too late. Don't be lazy in a way. And so one idea is, you use a preprocessor, and then it converts it to JSON, and you have all the super speed of JSON parsing. And as you have seen, adding the converter instead of a full JSON parser is usually, a tiny. So it's usually tiny. And so the JSON-X, what it does, instead of JSON parse, you use JSON-X parse. Or if you use human JSON or JSON 5, instead of JSON, you just add JSON 5 parse. And then you would have all the machinery of the new one. But let's look at a real case study. GraphQL, I think, is also the fashion. The hipsters are using GraphQL. I don't believe in GraphQL. I use SQL, And in 50 years, I'm still using SQL. And so what's this JSON? But actually, if you look at GraphQL, the query language, it's not JSON. Because, of course, JSON sucks if you want to type it by hand. If it's generated, you don't care. But if you type it, and if you look at a GraphQL query, what do you see? It's unquoted keys. You don't have to type the quotes, You don't have to type, they don't care about the commas. And now the big question is, do they have comments, Anybody guess if they have comments in GraphQL? And so the file system, and then of course it creates proper JSON. But what about comments? And of course, what is a computer language without comments? It's a disaster. So it has comments, of course, and they can code Unicode line terminator, and even the part insignificant commas and non-significant commas. They are not going crazy about commas. So the computer can handle it. And one case study. Anybody still has a blog or a website? Remember the web feed? So the web feed, they were pretty popular, and they were in XML. But then, one idea was, to reach the young guys, to offer, and they have no clue of web feeds, and XML, what is XML. And so finally, again, not big companies, but two guys, they created the JSON web feed for blogs and for everything, and it's called JSON feed, the web standard. And of course, the point of JSON feed is JSON. Yeah. Okay, so and what is, you can blog post and so on, but this sounds super boring, you know, a web feed. What is a web feed? And so you can rebrand basically a web feed is, what is it? It is a headless, or now it is a Jamstack. So it's the web feed is a universal serverless headless microservice content management HTTP JSON API. It's universal and it's even a standard. It's super simple. It's free, you know. There's no better, you know, content management system in the world, yeah. But who is using it? Anyway, so anybody knows RSS? What does it stand for? What's your guess? C, really simple authentication. Close. This was 2005. But the point is, you know, they all are correct. The only joke is the enterprise rapid authentication solution from IBM. But the other ones, you know, it started as RDF site summary was the original name, and the RDF was part of the semantic web, which anybody knows how the semantic web is nowadays called? It's called JSLD, and this stands for JSON linked data. So you have to put in JSON somewhere to get, you know, the attention of the young developers. But yeah, so it was the RSS, and so there are actually lots of different formats. The atom in XML, and so there was not really there was no JSON. And so, yeah, sorry, let's skip this one. I have shown the website. Anybody know JSON Freed from Signal and Noise from Basecamp? So the funny part, you know, is that was the inside joke. JSON, you know, he knows this guy, JSON Feed, because it's his name. He's JSON Feed, if you spell it, you know. And the funny part, this is the JSON feed, you know, it's a tweet. He posted this tweet. And one part of the JSON feed, the idea is, you know, nowadays the kids, or if you use updates, you don't have these big blog post stories. And then usually you had the title of your story, of your blog post, and then you had the content and more the author, the date, and so on. But if you have a tweet update or a Facebook status update, all you have your update, which is a single text line. And so this JSON feed was evolved. You know, it can handle modern micro. They're called sometimes micro blogs. And this example shows you the JSON feed. For this JSON feed, I know this guy. And the important part is the content text, you know. So you know, if you have as content text is, hi, I'm here. If you know it's the content itself and it's not the title, because in the other ones, it's impossible to tell, you know, is this the headline or is this the blog story? Even artificial cannot solve it because you have to tell, you know. And so they solve it simple. If it's a title, you have to say title. If it's the text, you say, you know, content text. And so that's the part. And the other part is it's impossible to tell. It might be HTML, you know, or it might just be plain text. And so this new format, you know, has this crazy idea, you know, if it's HTML, you have the content HTML and the content text. But the point is, you know, it's actually, the idea is to make it simple. And so why JSON? So this, if you do a Google Trends search, you can see this was last year, and JSON is now, the JSON search is now more popular than XML. So that's the blue line. And so this is the, if you do, maybe I show the other one first. If you create a new format and then you declare it as a standard, then usually you get this comic, which is good, and it tells you, if you try to have a new universal standard, and then basically you have 15 or 16, and so they tell you, please don't create new standards, and which is of course it's silly to say, very stupid. And so that's how the world really looks like, the date format. Anybody know how many date formats in the world? And so there's this public service announcement, even it's an ISO standard, Why is not everybody using this date format? But do you want to live in this world, If you're in a big company, you want 0 and 1. A simple world. But anyway, so the last one, the JSON feed. The web feeds, they are still popular, or the only alternative for broadcast, A broadcast is just an RSS web feed. And so, of course, this JSON feed also supports broadcast radio shows. All you have to do, your audio is just an attachment in the web feed. In the old one, it's called enclosure. But it's just, it's just a file attachment, and you can add as many attachments as you like. And so this one shows you, that's the JSON web feed. And how would you improve it? If you have to type it by hand, would you like to type it by hand? Even though, it's simple. And so if you use, so we skip this, but this is the same JSON feed. Oh, that's the JSON feed in version 1.1, where you don't have the unquoted, where you don't have the unquoted, where you have unquoted keys, and I can show you some more improvements. But I said, I'm not a big fan of JSON. What is coming after JSON? What's even a better format? And so I'm a big believer in what's called text, And it's the same with the standard, People tell you, never ever, create your own text format. You're crazy, You have to create your own parser and what so forth. But the English language or the German language, if you have a book, it's text. And so don't be shy. Create your own text formats. They are the best. In 50 years, nobody cares about JSON. Will not exist anymore. But in the text and the alphabet, it's basically, I claim it's forever. And so here's an example of, I have a feed text format. And the feed text format is in text. And this is called journal, as an example. This is called journal text. It's a format that it's a blog. A journal is a blog. And so what it does, it's a blog, a journal in a single text file. And every day or every week, if you write, you just have to add at the end, and then you just have a separator. But it's all, everything in one file. And so this would be, to show a live example. So this is the journal text, the specification, the website, and the organization, journal single text format. And the example I have is one day in Vienna, one day in Linz. And so here is this example with one day in Vienna. The example, a perfect day in Vienna. Sorry, I have to update for Linz. But yeah, so I always end up in a beer pub. But this basically, it's actual, it generates, in this case with GitHub pages from your text file, your blog from a single file. And it should have a JSON feed. Yeah, so let's wrap up the, I show you, yeah, that's, I have shown this one. Yeah, so, okay. And so, the last one. So this is the, for the JSON 1.1, this is the specification or GitHub organization. And I can show you, the last one is this was the JSON 1.1 feed. And here you have let's look at the one optimization, for example. If you want to make it more human-friendly, is I argue that you can use both, but a dot is more for computer freaks, and usually you would have the equal sign. So this would be the version, you know, alternate equal. There's nothing wrong, you know. It usually looks better. And then if you have the records, the brackets, you know, makes it even simpler for the brackets, you know. But that's, you know, how easy it would be to improve. So this is the classic podcast, and then the improved version. It still might be still hard to type by hand, but I think it's easier. You have the multi-line, unquoted, and then for the record types would be a special shortcut. And it's still JSON. You have to convert it with a couple of lines. And the last one, yeah. And so that's actually the JSON, the original website, how it all started. The idea was, of course, the success of JSON, of course, is that it's it's a simple format. So that's still, yeah. So if any question, you know, or. Okay.